What's going on, guys? Today we're talking about rear delt exercises. So we had a request for this one. A lot of folks just reach for the rear delt dumbbell fly, the face pull and so forth. Nothing wrong with those variations. However, if we think about the rear delt's main function, which is horizontal abduction, then we could be a little bit more strategic with our variations, because then we can actually target working through that full strength curve throughout the concentric and eccentric and not losing tension. So let's dive into the first variation and see what we got. First movement we're going to be doing is a chest supported rear delt fly. So 45-degree angle bench, grabbing our lighter dumbbells here. Chin is just above the bench, taking that traditional grip that we normally would if we had this similar machine here where we're doing a rear delt fly. And we're going to focus on bringing up the dumbbells, keeping the chest planted and focusing on letting those delts move the shoulder. So a big mistake you'll often see folks make with this movement is when they do them just floating here, they'll end up using too much momentum and that ends up throwing them off of the bar path or the dumbbell path that we want. And then with this specific variation, one way people can often mess it up is when they're rowing, they pull back so much versus keeping that chest nice and planted and actually making the rear delts do a majority of the movement versus starting to include the rhomboids, lats, and so forth. The second movement is going to be a chest-supported single arm rear delt cable fly. Now, why do I like this over dumbbells? Well, if we look at how the dumbbell's momentum is going to be, right? So we're moving through the concentric and then through the eccentric here, and we're down at the bottom, we lose tension, right? So our arms are just hanging. When we have a cable here continuously pulling the arm, the rear delt is going to have to engage throughout the concentric, eccentric. Even down here at the bottom, my rear delt is going to be firing, trying to stabilize that arm. So similar mechanics as we just did in the previous exercise, keeping that chest nice and down, pulling all the way through and controlling that eccentric. Again, cables are awesome because we don't lose any of the tension due to gravity. So we're not stacking the joints, we're not letting the joints hang and so forth. So similar mechanics when we do like skull crushers, bicep curls, and anything else where we implement a cable over a dumbbell or a barbell. All right, so third movement. So let's say you don't have an incline bench available or your gym's a little bit tight. You can do a variation where you are leaning forward. So similar like we position ourselves in a dumbbell row. We're gonna grab the cable, put it on the lowest setting, grip onto the base here, set the back, and then move through that similar range of motion. And once again, cable's nice because it's going to keep the tension on the rear delt the whole time. Now, one thing I will say is that when you are doing this variation, try to align the arm's pull with the cable itself. We obviously don't want to be pulling back here. That's going to shift force into everything but the rear delt. Fourth movement is the face pull, but two things to think about in case you do them now and you do not do these cues. So we're gonna grip the cable pulley with our thumbs away. We're not gripping with the thumbs close, thumbs away. And when we line up the angle of the face pull itself, we wanna be pulling almost at like a 10-degree angle from where the cable's positioned. So watch where I finish here. Why do we do that? Well, when we pull the cable apart at the top, we want those rear delts to be doing the pulling. And if we're pulling down here, we could be limiting some of the potential to actually work the rear delts and engage them. So 10 degrees, pull apart at the top, and focus on spreading the rear delts versus bunching up the traps and then rowing through. So spread versus row and then pull. Fifth variation we're going to talk about is the rear delt dumbbell fly. Chances are you've done this before, but two things to think about to make it a little bit better. Now, I usually opt for a cable here. So if you have a cable set up to where you can actually go 2 cables, do it. But if you have dumbbells, totally works. So 2 things to think about. We want to have the torso being in that middle ground for when we're bent over. We don't want to be so folded and we don't want to be so upright. Remember, we're trying to isolate the rear delts. And how we're going to do that is with horizontal abduction. So when we grip our dumbbells, you'll often see people do a neutral grip. Nothing wrong with the neutral grip. However, I think it could be a little bit limiting when it comes to really trying to isolate and spread those delts at the top. So I like to go with a double overhand grip and then row and spread versus rowing up and then pulling. So something that I like to think about when it comes to a cue is to think as though the elbows are being pulled up on a string like this, like they're out, like you're trying to fly away almost, or you have like a C momentum with those elbows. So and you want to go nice and controlled, slow the tempo. At times you'll see folks load these a little bit too heavy and you'll see that momentum. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. However, if we're really trying to isolate the rear delt, I like to go with a lighter weight, slow down the tempo, and actually control the eccentric. Plus, that way you can really focus on hitting the rear delt versus using the traps, lats, and everything else to assist in the movement. The final variation, and this is one of my favorites, is a chest supported where you're in a more vertical position and we're doing the cable single arm rear delt fly. So what we're gonna do, grab the cable, we're gonna position the body so the shoulder is just at the top here. We don't want it floating. We wanna actually place it here, because what that's gonna do now is when we pull apart, we can try to keep that shoulder down and really focus on the rear delt doing the movement here versus being up here and potentially using momentum. So keeping that chest planted to the bench, pulling apart, and making the rear delt do the movement. So when it comes to the cable itself, as you can see, we're parallel with the floor. We don't want to be too far up, too far down.